look at all these bear slayers.
I went on a hike to compare the Gen 1 bear slayers compared to the Gen 2 bear slayers. I wore Gen 2 on one foot, Gen 1 on the other foot, did the 2 or 3 mile hike in them, first break-in, removed the kilties, and so now I've got lots of good information and lots of good experience to compare and contrast the two, so you guys know what you're actually buying, and it's interesting and it's fun to do from my perspective of product design and what worked and what ideas worked, why did they work, what didn't work, what did we gain, what did we lose, because there's no way to just straight improve a product. There's always going to be some concessions made based off price point, based off of manufacturer, based off materials, based off of concept. And so this was really, really fun for me. And so I thought I'd just hop in and do one more video because I liked it. And I'm gonna send out because I recorded my thoughts and I kind of did a break and hike. I'll send that in the limited edition email list. So if you're in that list, you'll get that little bit of exclusive content. I was sweaty, my shirt was off. Come on, fellas, subscribe to that email list. But this is kind of a recap, not on the mountain. So you'll still get most of the information. And we're trying to catch up on orders from the scratch and dent sale. So the machine's running in the background, so apologize for the extra noise. But we're doing our best to get your orders out to you, so thank you guys for your support of that scratch and dent sale. We got Father's Day coming up on Friday, Father's Day sale, so get ready for that. And now, let's get to it. Let's start talking about what worked, what didn't work, because I got my little cheat sheet down here. So first thing I really want to do is remember to use my pedals, first of all, is show you the difference and just kind of explain the variations of them from generation colorways, because it got a little confusing, because it's a different kind of collaboration because we're taking this around to different collaborators. This was a design that we came up with in-house, as you can see right here with this beautiful prototype that Tay made. Wanted that extra arch support on the inside, that feathered midsole, 7-inch height. A lot of the features came from this first prototype. So this is not a generation because we never sold it, and I don't think we'll ever be a footwear manufacturer. I've worked with too many footwear manufacturers to know better. Like, I'm not saying it's bad, it's just a tough game. Manufacturing is not easy. And so this does not count as a generation. This would be like generation 0, I guess. And then your first generation of Bear Slayers was with JK boots. The very first one was the brown Bear Slayers in the bison rough out, so it looks like bear fur. It looks so freaking good. And then the other colorway we did of the Gen 1 was the blood bison, which also looked freaking good. And then, so both of these are in the same generation, Gen 1. And then Gen 2 is anything we're making with Nicks. So if we do more colorways in the future, if we do different drops, it'll still be considered the generation 2. It's kind of confusing, it's kind of messy, but I think that's the best way to do it for this kind of collaboration where we're moving around to different collaborators, and it just makes the most sense to me. And something I kind of came to a realization, or I re-remembered, I don't know, we do so many freaking boots and stuff, but when I was up on the hike, I realized that I was just thinking through, what is the concept? How do we position it? How do we explain it to people? What did we actually try to do here? Because it started off as the PP&W, Perfect Pacific Northwest boot. And then we evolved that to the Bear Slayers, because I was like, you know, what am I actually doing with this boot? I'm trying to make my perfect bear slaying boot. I'm trying to make my perfect Pacific Northwest boot. I'm trying to fix all the problems I have with the P&W boots, because they're the toughest, grittiest, most over-the-top work boots that money can buy across the world. I'm pretty sure that's a fair argument to make. And there's some flaws inherent to having the most superlative, most over-the-top version of anything. And so, you know, I was just kind of thinking, I was like, how do we position this? How do we explain it? If I were to explain it to my cousin that doesn't know anything about footwear or the heritage world, how would I explain it? And I think really what this whole concept comes down to is we were trying to not just perfect the Pacific Northwest boot, but make them as comfortable as humanly possible. Because that's the negative side of having some of the most overbuilt boots in the entire world, is when they're durable and they're rigid and they're beefy. Those don't go hand in hand with comfort a lot of times, especially during the initial break-in, the first couple months of wear. There's an argument to be made that once they're broken in, there's no other comfortable boots out there, but for me, I still think foam underneath my foot's more comfortable. And so at the end of the day, they're just not as comfortable as modern work boots. And so what this concept really is trying to make the most comfortable Pacific Northwest boot of all time. So then how did we actually do that? Let's start with probably the biggest difference between these generations, because this is the cross section of the JK, and we'll be cutting this in half for launch day on Thursday. And once again, if you're not signed up for the limited edition email list, get on that list, because not only do you get that exclusive video, but I forgot to tell you the whole reason you're supposed to get on it. To get early access, you guarantee a pair. You also get to the front of the line as fast as possible, so you get your order sooner. You get exclusive content, you get the sizing guides, you get everything you need to know before you order. So at 2 p.m. is when the video launches, and that's where I'll cut this in half. And I think we'll send you the cross section in Wednesday's email if you're on that list as well. So that's what that video is going to be, is showing you the cross section. But if you look at this cross section of the Gen 1s, you can see that half length midsole. And you can see on the outside it tapers down to there. And then on the Gen 2s, we completely remove that. Partially because Nix doesn't do that. Nix doesn't really have a model with that half midsole. And so it'd be a new way of constructing boots for them, and that's a big gamble to do. And it also allowed us to experiment with the concept and really play with their FlexWork Pro platform, which is basically that. It's supposed to be more flexible, more comfortable, easier to wear, lighter weight. And so we omitted that entire leather midsole. But what was the results of that? How did it actually feel when I was hiking? What's the difference I felt? Well, one of the biggest differences is just in overall flexibility. You know, this is it's packed with foam and stuff on the inside, so it's a little bit more rigid than usual. But you know, that's a lot of flex for a Pacific Northwest boot. But look at how far back it's flexing. Because it doesn't have that midsole, you get a lot of flex throughout this entire area. Instead of like the OT platform, because that shank ends right there, you get a hard pivot point. So it only pivots to there. You do get a little extra flex there, and as they break in, it's going to be more flexible. And keep in mind, this was an initial break-in hike, so everything's going to be exaggerated. And a lot of these problems will slowly be solved as you break them in, but they'll all remain to some degree. And so that's one of the bigger things is the actual flex in the toe. That's part of why people love Pacific Northwest boots, is because they are really rigid, they are really stable. And that's one of the key attributes of this one, is you get all that stability in the heel, you get all that torsional flex resistance. Because I'm gonna try my best to show you this. If I twist this boot like this, you can see how much I can torque that boot side to side. See that? Which is awesome for when you're wanting that flexibility and you want that articulation and you want to be really nimble and light on your feet, but it doesn't support you in the same way that this big chunky midsole. You know, just look at the flex difference here. See how hard that pivots right there compared to this that pivots a lot more rounded through here. This has one hard pivot point, goes straight and kinks up. This one rolls a lot more throughout the entirety of the boot. But you lose a lot of that stability, you lose a lot of that feel in your foot, but you gain comfort by reducing the pressure point right here, but you don't have that high pressure point on the inside of the boot right here and the outside of the boot right here, because there's less material bulked up. And so there's pros and cons to each. The Gen 2 is more flexible, more nimble, more articulate. It feels a lot more like a sneaker, versus the Gen 1 is a lot more rigid. It feels a lot more like a traditional Pacific Northwest boot, but you have those flaws of a hard pivot point, and it doesn't roll as naturally. But you still maintain a lot of that torsional flex through the majority of the boot. I don't even know if that made any sense. I tried my best to explain that. It's hard to explain if you haven't felt it. But honestly, the biggest difference between the two different styles of midsoles is the arch support. Because another big part of this whole concept was, initially, I just wanted more arch support for a Pacific Northwest boot, because a lot of times you get a lot of arch support all the way through here, through there. It's like the old saying is like you're standing on a roll of quarters, because you got to really beat that outside layer down to before they even start getting comfortable on the outside of your foot. So we just wanted to add another layer in there to bulk that up even more and really hug your arch on the outside of the boot. Through here, as your foot's on the inside, it's really gripping and hugging your foot so this doesn't overflex, because you can see on the outside here, you get lots of movement, a lot of flex through there. That's gonna bulge out, which is good on the outside, but on the inside, I want more support, I want more rigidity. But when we removed that half midsole, it reduced the arch support for sure. There are two different lasts as well, and we'll cover that in a second. But by not having that feathered midsole in there, you lose some arch support. And so out of the two of them, which one has more arch support? For sure the Gen 1. The Gen 1 has more arch support. I don't even know how to quantify it, if I'm being honest. This is how I would scale it. If a 10 out of 10 is like a super high heel, super arch support, like their tallest arch versions, and a 0 would be like a sandal. This is off the top of my head, so take it with a grain of salt. But these are probably like a 7. You get a lot of the arch support. They work really well, and they're fairly close to those really high arch boots because of that half midsole, and especially because of this extra support from that bear hug arch support. Compared to the Gen 2s, this is probably like a 6 out of 10. It's not a huge difference between the two, but you can feel it. And so we did lose a little bit of arch support because of the difference of the style of construction. And that's one thing I wish we could have maintained. There's really no way to do it, within the time frame of this collaboration, within the abilities of Nix. And so that is one thing that we lost, was just a little bit of arch support. But we gained the lack of arch support on the outside of the boot. Because when you run this midsole all the way through, it builds up this side and this side, which is a pain in the butt to break in because you got to really beat that leather down like I was talking about. Versus the Gen 2s, because you don't have that midsole, this is really flat and it's really comfy. And there's still a tiny bit of like bulk underneath the outside of my foot, but nothing compared to the other boots. And just aesthetically, we changed not the orientation, but like the shape of the panel. Because if you look at the first one, dropped straight down, but the problem was it kind of covered your big toe knuckle a little bit. And so I just wanted to bring that in just a little bit more. So you can see it would have initially just kind of gone straight down like this, but we took it in probably 3/4 of an inch. That clears that big toe knuckle, still wraps everything underneath your arch, still gives you that support, still has that panel to hug your arch, and it looks way better. Maybe it's a small difference, but when you really start digging into the details of the aesthetics, there is an aesthetic difference between these, and I think that looks way better, especially accompanied with the tactical counter from Nix's tactical line. And this change doesn't really have any effect on the functionality of the boot. This is all aesthetic. It all comes down to the aesthetic of the boot with this panel. But it looks so freaking good. Look at it. The lines are perfectly lined up, super angular. So that was an easy decision. I'm really happy with that one. Next one on my list. Ooh, this is another good one that I didn't realize until I was on the hike. I just noticed when I laced them up that on my Gen 2 Bear Slayers from Nix, it was a pretty wide gap right here. Versus my Gen 1 Bear Slayers from JK, this is a terrible shot. Sorry, I just unlaced it. Oh gosh, that's a horrible shot, but you get the point. You see how much tighter I can lace this down, and that gap gets really close to touching. What it really comes down to, where does that gap come from, or why is it caused? Well, I think JK just runs a lot bigger quarters. This panel right here is called the quarter, and JKs are really big. It sweeps really far down to the toe compared to Nix is cut pretty short on the toe. And so the whole quarter is just smaller. So then when you have a bigger one, it wraps around your shin even more and covering up that gap. Which, aesthetically, we could like one versus the other, but functionally it does make a difference because when you have all that extra bulk up your instep with the laces, with the tongue, with the kilties, and with the quarters being so close, that's even more material that you have to squeeze and flex and bend that we try to alleviate with the flex teeth. But after wearing these, I could definitely feel a difference between that gap here and this gap there. And it just looks better. I like the smaller quarters a lot more. So yeah, that was another little thing that I discovered just from the wear test. It's gonna be a long video, but allow me to be long-winded. This is like my favorite part of the design process, is like the testing, what worked, what didn't. And next one is the padded collar. So they look like they're different heights, but they're close enough. They're both 7-inch, but you could see the Gen 1 did not have a padded collar, the Gen 2 does. So why did we throw in a padded collar? Well, going back to the initial concept, trying to perfect this boot, trying to make it the most comfortable Pacific Northwest boot that you can buy. One of the flaws with P&W boots, or just any traditional boot, is when you lace these up all the way, all that pressure from the flex is distributed amongst your ankle, but it's pinpointed especially right here. And after you break them in, it's a lot easier to deal with. They're pretty comfortable once you really get them broken in, but it'll beat your calf up a good amount while you're breaking them in. And so by adding a padded collar, that just eases that break in, it eases the comfort, but it also allows you to cinch these boots a lot tighter around your ankle without them suffocating your circulation, and still being able to keep them tight enough that you're keeping all the dirt and grime out, but it feels looser because of the padding in the collar. Versus a traditional collar, to keep all the dirt and grime out, you really have to cinch them down pretty tight. Otherwise, you're gonna get rocks and stuff in there. So that fixes that problem. And even if you don't tie them tight, just having a little bit of extra flex in that little calf area makes a big difference in the really long hikes. You know, you don't always feel it for 2 or 3 miles, but when you're on a 10-mile hike and you have just a little bit of alleviating of that pressure, it goes a long way. And you can see also those quarter differences manifested in the size of the opening of the boot. You know, I've still cinched them down all the way. Like, there's no way there's anybody that has that small ankles. This guy does. This guy's got a case of the lads. But you can see if I cinch both these down, how much bigger the opening is on the JK versus the Nix. Some of that is due to, I think Nix cut this for my ankles, but a lot of it's due to the fact that the quarters on the JKs are a lot bigger, and so you've got more room, and so you don't cinch down as much. But this was a problem that we didn't initially fix with the padded collar. So what we wanted to do was, most boots, especially heritage boots, instead of a speed hook at the top, it's an eyelet. And the reason they do that is kind of a mystery to some degree. Some people say it's a logger knot, some people say it's for this and that. I actually don't know the truth of it. I don't know if anyone knows the truth of why people started doing it that way. But what we tried to do was put a speed hook at the top so that you had more room for lacing, and for the box lacing we're gonna go over in a sec. But especially for when you get a lot of pressure through here, you can take it off that top speed hook, drop it down to here, and that creates just a little bit of extra flex because it's open at the top. And so that's a big part of the way we tried to solve it initially, was instead of a padded collar, just add an eyelet to the top, or a speed hook to the top. Which also allowed us to play with the lacing, because you also notice most P&W boots have 4 eyelets down here. We wanted to do 3 eyelets, 3 flex teeth, 3 more speed hooks, because I like being able to lace my boots down a little bit further. It allows you to get out of the boot easier, but it also allows you to play with the lacing systems. Because the idea behind this was, let's say you're on a trail, you got them laced up, you got them all tied how you want, and you skip that top eyelet to allow even more pressure relief, but also to allow some room for your lacing customization as you hike. So you're 5 miles in on a hike, you're starting to get a lot of pain here, the flex teeth aren't doing it well enough for you. You can pop these laces off without untying the upper of the boot. Like this, and like this. And you can cinch these up. I should have just unlaced it. I meant you don't have to what I meant to say is you don't have to untie it. So you keep the knot tied, you can unlace them, and then you can go back into your 2, 1, 3 lacing. 2, 1, 3. And then you've got that extra room, because we skipped that top speed hook, that you don't have to retie it, because that extra gap is taken up by either the unique lacing 2, 1, 3, or through these other speed hooks at the top. Or you can do a box lace. You can skip. Let's say you just want to skip straight to that. Let's say you just want to go cross. You just want to alleviate some of that pain that way. And you lace it up. You lace this. This is not usually how you lace it on your own foot, but bear with me. And then all that extra gap is taken up by that extra speed hook. And so it allows you to customize and change your lacing mid-hike without retying your boots. And it also allows you just to customize that lacing system with the benefits of having the flex teeth. Was there any difference between the 2 generations of the lacing styles? Was one easier than the other? No, they're basically exact same. There's not a big enough difference between them to affect the style of lacing, because they're basically identical in the eyelet and speed hook orientation. And similar story with the flex teeth. The flex teeth definitely work. When you're first breaking these in, I remove the kilties, because anytime I'm breaking in a boot, there's no reason to break a kiltie in on top of it. It's just gonna cause you more pain. So I do the first 3 or 4 wears without a kiltie, then I put the kiltie in. That way I've got the boot broken in exactly how I want, and then I break in the kiltie after that. So I remove the kilties, and between the 2 flex teeth, they're identical. You know, like that's 3 flex teeth, 4 cutouts, They flex about the same, they feel about the same, and any difference I did feel was more caused by the difference in the quarter size and how much it came together compared to how spaced out the Nix one is. As for the height, 7-inch height works magically for both of them. If you line them up, technically the Gen 1 is like a 1/4 of an inch taller, maybe 1/2 an inch, but we're splitting hairs. And really, I think the last thing to cover, maybe the last two things, is the last that these are built on. So you can, this is the Thurman last by Nix. It's based off the Munson last developed for World War II. And it was made in an era where everyone was wearing dress shoes for military boots, because that's all that people wore. They didn't really even have anatomical footwear back then. And so finally Dr. Munson was like, what if we made the boots shaped like the foot instead of trying to get the foot to shape like the boot? And he designed this last and completely revolutionized military footwear with it. And that's still popular today. As for the actual effect of wearing these two different lasts, because like I said, this is more of a Munson style last. This is more of your traditional Pacific Northwest last, where it's pretty almond shaped. It's pretty narrow. There's no like significant bump for your big toe. I don't even know which, this is the big toe side. And so when I was actually wearing these, you can feel a big difference right off the bat. It's you all this extra room for your pinky toe and your big toe. I didn't have really any pressure on them versus the more traditional last. It pressured my big toe, it pressured my pinky toe. And that's part of the idea with these old school lasts is, as a logger and a firefighter and all these old school ways of working, you wanted your foot locked into the boot. And so they would basically squeeze your foot in there to some degree, and your foot would bulge out the areas that needed to bulge out, so you're still really tight in the boot without sliding around on the hillsides, giving you blisters. And so it is a function-based design, but it's not the function that I'm trying to get out of the Bear Slayers. I don't need like my toe squished all day. And you know, you can still get super wide widths in these other lasts. You know, you can widen them out as much as you want, but the whole thing widens out. So you don't necessarily just widen out the toe, it just gets wider all around. And for my comfiest Pacific Northwest boot, the Bear Slayers, I like that extra comfort. Because it still hugs your foot, it still grips your foot, it still prevents you from side heeling, but it's more comfortable across the board. Like the whole last is more comfortable. Like wearing one on one foot and one on the other it made it very obvious that this has to shape to your foot, where this starts roughly at the shape of your foot. And your whole foot is more locked in with this last because it's more anatomical. Whereas the more logger last, it's just the proportions are just kind of weird if you're trying to get this kind of feel out of the boot. I still love this last. I think it's very similar to the last we put on the Drifters. I think it's really similar to the 4811 that White's does. So I still love it, but for this specific purpose, this is better. So now to the final questions. Which of these two generations is the comfier generation? Clearly the Gen 2. This is significantly more comfortable because you don't have as rigid of a midsole, you don't have that hard pivot point caused by that midsole, because it still has midsole, it's just a rubber midsole. You get the extra comfort from the extra wide last, or the anatomical last. You get the comfort from the flex teeth, both are the same. You get the comfort of the padded collar. So those few little things really elevate the comfort of this. Even though a lot of it is the same, they feel very different on foot. So most comfortable, definitely this one, by far. Which of the Bear Slayers has more support? Definitely the Gen 1. When you have this big chunky midsole, it does support the boot a lot more. Like I can't really, like look how much less I can flex this side to side compared to when I'm flexing this side to side. It's slight on video, but you can feel the difference in how it moves. And so if you're looking for a more traditional Pacific Northwest boot feel, the Gen 1 is a lot closer. I would say it's like 75% PNW, 25% sneaker feel, for lack of a better way of describing it. Whereas the Gen 2 is like 60% PNW, 40% comfy sneaker feel. But you don't have the same support. You lose some of that hardcore PNW feel. And I'm okay with that, because you can go buy any number of Pacific Northwest boots that feel like Pacific Northwest boots, that have the full length midsole, have the half midsole, have all these things. And that's why this is a collaboration. So we wanted to evolve it. We wanted to push the limits of it and try to make it the most comfortable PNW boot that money can buy. And I think we nailed it. Is there any room for improvement to make them more comfy? One thing you could do is throw a really soft wedge on the bottom. But these are, I wanted a hiking boot. I wanted to be able to do a lot of stuff in it, bear hunting, casual hikes, working, wear them casually, dress them up, dress them down. And so I think you'd be losing a little bit of the Bear Slayer vibe, but we could do an ultra comfortable version at some point that has that wedge sole. You also do lose a little bit of comfort by having that extra bear hug arch support. That's another place that somebody could be like, no, you lose comfort there, because I think you do. And I guess it depends on what you mean by comfort. To me, I'm okay trading traditional comfort of like no pressure and soft and squishy for a little bit of arch support comfort. You do lose that extra open panel there by covering it up, but you gain comfort by gaining support, is what I'm trying to say. But that is a point that you could say like, oh no, that's not the comfiest P&W boot. But I'm really curious to see what you guys think. What's a more comfortable P&W boot than this? Because I don't know if there is. I think we've fixed a lot of the problems that cause discomfort for P&W boots. Oh, and I forgot to talk about this. No matter what the collaboration is, there's always like these tales that get passed around of what's happening and why it's happening. And they're like borderline conspiracy theories of what's going on at Rose Anvil. We had a DM that got sent to us. It was like, oh, this is what happened with JK, and then like they owe him all this money and all this. I talked to Weston. No, you didn't. So, somebody literally sent me a DM of a screenshot from someone on Reddit being like, hey, I talked to Weston. No, you didn't. Take everything on Reddit with a grain of salt, because JK does not owe us any money. And the whole plan with this was to evolve it over time, take it to different collaborators because of this whole thing, because you get to compare and contrast, you get to evolve the ideas, you get to push the limits of it. So anytime you see anyone claiming that they talked to me about inside baseball, don't believe them. I don't even answer DMs, maybe like one a week. I don't think I ever replied to a comment. Sometimes the editors do. And I'm especially not spilling trade secrets and industry secrets and spreading false drama through random people in DMs. I love conspiracy theories, but it's really weird being on a very minor version of a conspiracy on the other end of it, where people are like making up all this stuff and all these theories, and all we're trying to do is make cool products and evolve the footwear industry, keep everyone accountable. We don't have time for full-on conspiracies. So yeah, it's just weird. So take all that with a grain of salt. JK doesn't owe us any money. And I think that's it. I think that wraps it all up. How long was this video? I think it was like a 30-minute video. So huge shout out to Nix for being willing to do this and take on this concept and evolve it with us. And I think we did evolve it. I think it's a really good next step in the right direction for the PP&W, the Bear Slayers, the comfiest P&W boot that you could buy. Let me know what you guys thought. Let me know what you think we should fix on the next iteration, which brands you think we should move this to next. Let me know what you dislike about the changes, what you like about the changes. And I think that's it. I think that's everything. So thank you guys for watching. Get ready for the drop on Thursday. Get on that email list. And thank you guys for our support. And huge shout out to the Rose Anvil crew. This has been a really fun launch. Yeah, we got some cool footage. We got some cool shots. And I think it just turned out good. So huge shout out to the Rose Anvil crew. And thank you guys. See ya.